Welcome to the WBC Faster Together, the LinkedIn Live series of the Women Business Collaborative. I'm Gwen Young, Chief Operating Officer of the WBC. And today we are joined by two of our key advisory council champions, Dara Klein and Velma Deleveaux. WBC is an unprecedented alliance of over 65 women business organizations and hundreds of business leaders, building a movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability, we are mobilizing thousands to create momentum and accelerate the pace of change. We celebrated that momentum and kicked off Women's History Month at the New York Stock Exchange, which was fantastic. And we were joined by members of our leadership, a diverse board of directors, advisory and leader councils, and our staff that include more than 34% people of color. Please check the chat for our 9 action issues through which we aim to accelerate change, and join our movement at wbccollaborative.org. Each week on these series, we offer different ways to advocate change and accelerate impact by presenting data, research, and best practices, by lifting up the power of women's voices for change, and by showing the importance of cross-generational collaboration and the allyship of men in the movement. Today, we want to talk about how women rise into the C-suite. And to do this, we are speaking with two of our key advisory council champions, Dara Klein, the Managing Director of Kaplan Partners, and Velma Deleveaux, the Managing Partner of Veaux Solutions. Welcome, Dara and Velma.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Always thrilled to have the two of you and talk about such interesting issues of how we rise to the C-suite. So let's start. Let's start with the interview you two and discussion you two had about Velma's rise to the C-suite.
Right.
Dara, what did you learn? And Velma, what was your pathway as you ascended through the ranks? Do you want to start, Dara?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Gwen. You know, for Velma and many other successful women, the mentoring portion of her success and her rise to the C-suite started early, started when she was in high school. And I found that with other women too. That the mentoring portion, that she had mentors and other women had mentors starting very early, which that was a great learning for me. And I'm really looking forward to sharing that with other people. But further, as a very intellectually curious person, Velma is a person who, and I'm very happy to share this with Velma and it together. She's intellectually curious. She asks a lot of questions because she wants to solve problems. We need to encourage people to ask questions, to be intellectually curious. We should not be defensive or feel threatened at all when people ask questions. They want to learn. I think it's fantastic. And then another thing is that Velma and so many other women, great women and successful women in the C-suite are self-aware. And I just think that's a terrific way to be so that we really understand our strengths.
Thank you. Agree. So appreciate those words, Dara. I think what would surprise a lot of people is that I didn't know what I wanted to be at an early age. That's similar to a lot of people that I know. And then there are other folks, many of us have friends who have known from the beginning since they were a child that they wanted to be a doctor or a university president.
Right.
All I knew was that I loved adventure. I wanted to see what the next frontier looked like. And I wanted to be part of the team that helped us get there. Mm-hmm. So I had this interest in strategy and I used my curiosity, which kind of propelled all of these different types of experience. So I ended up academically through Georgia Tech, Harvard, and Penn State. And then I had a very, I would say, non-traditional type of experiences. I did not stay in one particular industry. I worked across different ones. I started in computer manufacturing, and then I became a professor. And so spent some time in academia. And then I was a corporate leader in management consulting, focusing on research and development solutions, cybersecurity, technology. And now I drive solutions for my own firm, driving strategy, delivering strategy in regarding growth, risk management, and supply chain resilience. And so it's a real variety of experiences that characterizes my career, and to the point now where I think I have been enriched by those experiences. I think what's been non-traditional is that I also experienced different types of positions as an engineer, as a professor, as a consultant. And so I think that's been the path that I have taken. And I think that the traditional part of that is the fact that I really believed in a strong academic background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I would say it sounded like the traditional part was the academic, but the non-traditional was a little bit of like the switching industries and kind of where you're going. How do you think that came up? Was that mentoring, sponsorship, networks? Like what drove that non-traditional?
I think because I had mentors who really believed in me and they nurtured my curiosity. They just wanted me to be able to solve problems. They understood how important that was to me and how fulfilling it was. And so they always helped to facilitate the introductions, the information that would advance my thinking and also my ability to secure different types of experiences in these positions. And so back to what Dara said earlier, that mentoring part, and I would say it was not just mentoring, it was the sponsorship that people were really advocates for me. And it felt okay. I didn't feel like I was constricted and had to be, stay in a particular place, in a particular industry. I wanted that breadth of experience. And I think it has really helped me now, and especially given some of the evolving roles that we see for C-suite, understanding technology, digital, all those sorts of things are now being more required for folks in the C-suite. So I think it has served me well.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up, and Gwen, you and I had spoken about this before, but we had talked about, and maybe you were going to ask us this, we had talked about how 2022 looks different. And so I hope this sounds interesting to you, but Velma and I would love to share what we're seeing out there what does 2022 look like?
Post-COVID world, different
Yes.
technology world, whole bunch of things. I mean, I'd love to hear what that looks like as people bringing back the workforce, people stepped away. Imagine you're just starting out.
Exactly.
What does it look like out there, you guys?
It is a new world out there. One thing that for certain that we are seeing, and I'll speak to that from an executive search vantage point, but also as I've spent time with many other women who have ascended to the C-suite, all women of color, employees are driving the process. Candidates are driving the process. It is a talent-rich environment, and people in general, candidates, people, women, men at all levels, they are less willing to settle. They won't just take anything. They have things that are important to them, ESG, their own personal lives. They don't want to settle, which we think is a good thing just for living life to its fullest. The other thing is, finally, the value of diversity is finally taking flight. We're finally seeing inroads of corporations and smaller businesses understanding that diversity of thought really is what makes things happen. It affects the bottom line and it affects the productivity and thinking. We're finally making inroads there. And then finally, back to hiring decisions of companies, we're seeing companies bring on diversity and using different criteria and different ways to do that. Our firm worked with a client who really wanted to make sure they had additional diversity of thought. And they decided that this C-suite position, they were going to say that the candidate and commit to the candidate that they could live remotely so that we could attract talent in urban environments to broaden the scope of the talent pool. And that really, really worked. And prior to 2022, or prior to the pandemic, that just simply didn't happen. So we feel that we're gaining wins across the board, little by little.
Yeah. And Dara, I would agree with you. I think people have there's so much turmoil and uncertainty in the world right now, and it's a consistent, pervasive thing that we're all going through.
Right.
And so people have been forced to re-examine and reflect on what really matters to them at work and at home.
Mhm.
And because of that, it is no longer taboo for people to leave a job that does not fit them.
Mhm.
People, a lot of the expectations have now changed for the employer and the employee. So folks don't feel constricted to that job where people would say, well, what would people say about me if I left this job? It looks like I'm skipping around. It has become the norm
Right.
to skip around and have these different experiences, and people
And
are
respected. Respected.
respected. And I've had a mentee, a senior executive call me and said, I know I've only been here 10 months. I have a male colleague. He's been here 10 months and he says he's not going to stay anymore. He's leaving. And she said, I think I'm going to wait the year out because of how it's going to look. And I listened to her, but I also knew that it wasn't going to be as negative as she was making it. It has really become the norm now for people to move around, whether they're looking for the right culture, the right supervisor, the right pay, the right experience. People have given themselves permission to do that. I also think technology is a major factor because now it allows us to work from anywhere. Dara and I had this discussion about how, it opens up a whole new world to her with regard to her executive search, because employers are now saying that that's okay. That widens the pool in terms of diverse candidate thoughts and things like that. So I think technology also is a factor as well. And then you have the trend that I think, when you mentioned earlier about ESG, and the fact that that is a major factor that our stakeholders and board members are really grappling with, this whole idea that we've got to make sure that we are playing a positive and impactful role in this arena. And so the C-suite now has to really pay attention to how this is evolving. It's no longer acceptable that we have complex minerals in our supply chain, that we haven't really asked the tough questions about human trafficking and child labor and things like that. So those things are becoming more and more important. And I think because of that, the whole concept of this non-traditional ascent to the C-suite, that's becoming more of a conversation. Harvard Business Review last year did a study that looked at, the most compelling and exciting candidates that they were choosing were the ones who had these variety of experiences across different industries. And most of them many of them that were attractive had capabilities that included digital and technology. And so those two areas are really becoming more and more important part of the qualification for C-suite. So I think that this is a space that we all need to watch, and folks on the phone who are interested in C-suite positions, that whole concept of multidisciplinary, a lot of things that we used to think were just required for C-suite, they're table stakes now. You have to go beyond that. Right. And CEOs especially now have to be able to speak to multiple different stakeholders and talk about some of the social issues. They have to engage in ways that 10, 20 years ago, we didn't expect from them. So a lot of that is changing. Communication, I think, is becoming strategic communications critical because people, if there's a misstep in how you discuss an issue, if you're not conversant on it, it actually can be a huge, huge problem. So that role is really changing, and because the requirements are changing.
I want to pick up on that a little bit. Because, and you talked about it too as well, Dara, some of these requirements are changing, right? So it sounds like some of the requirements are coming in is sort of different skill sets, broader skill sets, right? Digital technology, you said social media. I see that in a lot of job descriptions. You see sort of that awareness of it, which maybe goes to that comms. what are some of these other criteria that employers or organizations are looking at? Used to think the traditional way was the classic this, get your P&L responsibility, in addition to staying in the same job, right? Or do Jack Welch lemonade stand. But what are some of the other criteria that are coming out there that that employers and organizations are looking for?
I think one of the things that's coming up a lot with us that hits at the top of the list is the ability to attract diverse talent. And that does not mean shoving it off to somebody else for them to go and post a job on the internet. That's not what it means. It means setting the tone at the top and making sure that every senior leader, and frankly, every leader in the organization, is walking that talk, or right, we're talking the walk, walking that modeling behavior of saying, we know that we're in a position of authority, frankly, at any level. And if we really want to change the numbers to increase productivity, to increase diversity, it's all of our responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility to reach out into the organization, mentor someone, speak up for someone, which is exactly what sponsorship is, and teach them all of these skills. So it used to be, okay, a company would have a training program and that's how they learn. Well, I think it's a responsibility of all leaders in a company to teach these skills that are so important for productivity and bottom line results. And we have to make a special effort to reach out to the diversity within our own company. And if we don't have it, to go out and get it. It does start at an early stage. If we want to improve, as we call it, the pipeline, we have to start early. So that's really, really important. But we need to make a deliberate effort to teach our women, teach all people of color, sponsor them, and tell them that their opinion, their contribution counts, because too many marginalized people have left the workforce. It's because no one cared. And we have to tell people that we care.
Yeah.
Velma, what would you say? Yep, go ahead.
I want to foot stomp those points around being deliberate in our action. I think it's, if you ask yourself the question, what have I done as a leader to look beyond my inner circle of people who look like me, sound like me, and had the same experience? If you ask yourself that question when you look at your monthly goals and your answer, and you don't have a good answer, that's something you need to deal with. I think we go to diversity training and it sounds good, and then we don't have an action plan around it, or the action plan doesn't really have teeth. And so there's internal, and then when we talk about externally, what are we doing? So I think a couple of years ago, maybe it was a year ago, there was some discussion. One of our corporate CEOs really made a splash by saying they could not really find diverse talent, right? And so what I want to do is to correct a misconception that, first of all, diverse talent does indeed exist. You just have to find it. And so I think what I've noticed in many corporations is that we're all looking at the same places for the same talent. You need to go to places that actually have access to the talent that you're seeking. And in many cases, there are organizations that are helping to vet the talent for you, but you've got to take the time, just like how we apply a lens of customer relationship management to our customers. We need to think of these. First of all, there are many universities. If you're looking for university students, you've got historically Black colleges and university, Hispanic Serving Institute, Native American institutions, just at the college level to forge those relationships. And they have to be treated the same way you treat your clients, that I've got to invest in building the relationship, and I got to take the time to understand the culture and what people are looking for. We spend a lot of money in corporate trying to understand what our clients likes and dislikes, what really matters to them, what's going to drive the sale. We need to do the same thing there. And then if you're looking for talent that is mature talent and experience. There are all sorts of professional development organizations. There's Executive Leadership Council, Caliber, and of course, WBC. So there are all these ways that people can access talent, but they're sort of treating it in a way that is not deliberate. You know, to Dara's point, it needs to be a deliberate thing that you're doing. And we need to have a different approach to how we're looking at these issues.
Well, this is wonderful. I mean, I think to tie it up and keep our eye on time, right? That deliberation and that kind of the varied experiences are going to exist, are continuing. And so both the employer and the employee need to look at those, value those, and be deliberate about the commitment to diversity across all the spectrums and windshields that you can look through at diversity. Thank you, Dara and Velma, for your insights today.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
And that's all we have time for today. We invite you to wbccollaborative.org to learn more about our initiatives to increase women in the C-suite and the boardroom, to address the underrepresentation of women and access to capital in certain industries like technology, and to advance a pipeline of women leaders to bring gender and pay parity and diversity, equity, and inclusion to the business landscape. Join our movement, and please join us here next week when Linda Peak-Shack speaks with Dr. Cindy Young on reverse mentoring and allyship. And join us weekly to keep up to date on our next guest, our progress for the movement for gender parity in business, and the latest issues by following us on social media at WBC Collaborative, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Have a wonderful St. Patrick's Day.